Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Owens, and I have the great pleasure of talking with Ben Proudfoot, the Academy Award-winning director of The Queen of Basketball and so many other things, great human, kind human, and the creative force behind Breakwater Studios.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker, and I have the pleasure of talking to my partner in crime, Stephanie Owens, of the Academy Award-winning The Queen of Basketball. So this is about the most fun I could possibly have in a Q&A because we have spent so much time in the trenches together. So excited to talk about the film and the creative process.
Yes. Let's start with your meet cute with documentary. Like, how did you meet documentary? Where were you at? Where was documentary? How did you fall in love with documentary?
It's a good question. So it's a meet cute because I don't think I ever really noticed documentary for the longest time as a kid. I remember going to the theaters a couple times and for documentaries for school. Bowling for Columbine was very memorable to me as a young person in theaters. And that really, I think, alerted me to the existence of documentary and also the, Michael Moore's use of archival. I think that always sort of stuck with me. But I was really interested in magic, sleight of hand magic as a teenager, and really only transitioned into filmmaking, right before I went to college. The first kind of documentary that I made was with a friend of mine in high school for the graduation ceremony. We made a 20-minute short documentary called Roots and Wings, where we interviewed all the students and made this film about that was supposed to be inspiring. And I really loved doing that. But I was really interested in being Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis, and I loved behind the scenes documentaries that Laurent Bouzereau had made about those filmmakers and watched them over and over and over again. But it wasn't until later that I really actually thought, ooh, documentaries are an amazing format, and specifically short documentaries. It took a number of years to get there.
Did you try your hand at larger narrative films?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, for sure. I mean, my first film in college was called Dinner with Fred. And it's like a big period narrative short film. I think it's still on iTunes or something.
It was a period piece?
A period piece, yeah.
That is ambitious.
Yeah, I think sometimes ambition can fill in for talent, right? So there was a big steam train scene, and it was 1940. It's a story of my grandfather. There was prosthetic old age makeup. There are all kinds of interesting things that were challenging. We recorded the score with musicians from John Williams Orchestra. We had all kinds of fun things like that, but it kind of didn't result in any, you kind of imagine you make a film and it's pretty good, and some studio head's going to call you up and say, you're good, kid, come on down to the Disney studios and we'll sign a contract or something. And it just didn't work that way. And so I just started making films that I loved and wanted to make. And short documentary was the only real format that I could afford to do. And so as soon as that connected with Vimeo and the ability to kind of reach 100,000 people with a film that I made in my bedroom, I was hooked. And really sort of that virtuous cycle with having an idea for the film, being able to make it autonomously, and then have a great conversation with a large audience was extremely satisfying. And I've kind of been sticking with that for the last 10 years or so.
So when you created Breakwater, was Breakwater always going to be doing short documentary? So at that point, you decided short documentary, Breakwater?
No.
Was it Breakwater?
The idea for Breakwater was to make big, expensive, scripted, feature-length films in the studio style.
Okay.
And to have all the creative departments together under one roof doing so. That's what I wanted to do. That seemed to be the highest and best thing that I could possibly reach for. And then over time, I realized that there was no actual value attributed to a longer film. That really what I enjoyed doing was championing stories. I liked reaching a large audience, and I loved the craft of cinema. I loved having all the creative departments under one roof. That was more important to me than exactly what format of cinema we were making. And really, in terms of like the business side of it, really the truth is that, brands who were running away from television ads were looking for ways to get involved in filmmaking, and were eager to get into the short documentary business. And that's really what helped us grow our business, was working with brands to make short documentaries. And then with the money that we made from those projects, we would make a couple original projects a year, and that just has grown over time.
And so short documentary specifically has been where you've really landed. And do you think that that plugs into getting to more audiences?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
big time. I mean, I don't know. We live in a world where it's hard to know the numbers because streamers don't really release how many people watch things, but I would guess that there are a number of our documentaries that outpace some of the most well-known feature documentaries in terms of viewership, simply because they're available for free on the internet. And, that you get more people watching it for that reason. I also think that by lowering the barrier of entry for how people can view it by making it free, you're simply going to reach a larger audience no matter what, basically, if you can figure out a way to market it and promote it properly. But yeah, I mean, it's a bummer. There's so many good films that are stuck behind paywalls of, struggling streaming services that don't have the viewers, but they acquired this documentary, and people simply aren't going to sign up for that thing to watch the thing. So I'd much rather my work be available for free on YouTube than sold for a good amount of money to a streaming service that no one has access to or wants to sign up for.
Yeah. And what's it feel like once you release one of your films out that night when it's like going live? Are you nervous? Are you excited?
Extremely. I don't know what's wrong with my personality, but I always focus on the negative comments.
I think that's really important to hear from someone, as accomplished as you, that you still struggle with that, because I know I definitely want to hide anytime. I won't even watch. I don't watch my Q&As. I don't watch my people watching my films. I don't want to be anywhere near it.
I agree. The one thing that helps me get over that is when we've made a film that is championing someone else. I feel totally comfortable being in the advocate seat,
Okay. Yeah.
and getting out there and saying, people ought to look at this, you need to meet this person, you need to understand the story. I have no problem with that. I feel very uncomfortable if I'm advocating for myself or my filmmaking, that I don't feel good about that. I know I have to do it. But that's part of why it's nice to have a company, because advancing the company helps everybody at the company. So that helps me sort of justify that. But I do find it easy to get out in front of one of our films if it's like The Queen of Basketball, where, we are basically custodians of Lucy's story. But I certainly don't enjoy listening to my nasal voice on a Q&A.
Yeah, I've never watched any of mine. So do you find yourself looking for more of these types of stories where you're advocating for other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sort of advocacy level is special, and is something that's kind of granted to you by the person if it works out that way. I think the baseline for the kinds of things I do is to do right by what that person told me, right? And kind of let them advocate for themselves, let them tell their own story, in as true a spiritual, obviously our work is that of illusion, of compressing time and combining things and manipulating emotion with editing and sound and music and color. So like, how do you use that magic for the good and with integrity and responsibility to the storyteller? That's kind of the baseline. And if you're lucky enough, and if it's something that sort of requires it, and you kind of have the faith of the person or the person's family or whatever, you get the honor of kind of pounding the pavement on behalf of the story. But I'm more looking for stories that I feel like, I think I'm pretty privileged to have the ability to make these films. I mean, I think I'm extremely privileged to have that capacity and opportunity, and to have good relationships with like the New York Times. That's an incredible platform. And so I try to be thoughtful about sort of how I can use that to make sure that stories that may not get told, and stories that may not be commercial, but are important, get told. I think that's another part of it. So many stories just don't get told because people can't make money off of it. And so I try to look for those. Yeah.
I wonder if we could talk a little bit about your interview style. As someone who's co-edited one of Ben's films, I've got to listen to 10 hours of Ben interviewing. And I'm really struck by how you're able to be so present with the people that you're interviewing. But I also can tell that you're thinking about the film as a whole and how you're asking questions and how you're drawing them out. And you seem to make people so comfortable that they over time are opening up to you very easily. And I wonder if that's something that you had to develop over time. Is that an innate ability, or where does that come from?
I think it's definitely developed. I think it's hard. It's hard for me to describe because it has been a slow process of just doing it thousands of times. I've probably interviewed, I don't know how many people, hundreds of people for sure. I think it's all about being genuinely interested. And it's also about being a really good audience for their story. And it's also about being aligned in wanting to help them look good. Most people are terrified of public speaking, which is a form of what's going on in an interview, right? Even though it doesn't feel like that, that's kind of what's happening. And so a big part of my job is kind of tearing down the formality of, oh my gosh, I'm on camera. Oh my gosh, I'm being interviewed. Oh my gosh, it's going to be on the front page of the New York Times. And just having a conversation where they're their best storytelling self. And then, also from the craft perspective, knowing kind of like what I need for you in the edit room, right? Oh, a plane flew over. Can you give me that again? Or I know I need sort of a button to this scene. And so I sort of asked, like, would you say that, that's when things changed? And they said, yeah, that's when things changed. I need that for a transition or something. So it's little, there is some magicianship, I'd say. But it's all kind of in service of wanting to, I'm kind of a coach. I see that as my job. I'm sort of an audience coach. And I kind of have those two hats, and I go between being the best audience ever and being a aligned coach that's more or less advising them what is that they're doing that's coming across really well, and guiding them away from stuff that's a distraction from the story or may not come across as well on camera. And so I kind of am both things as the director in the interview.
Can you think of where it could go wrong? Because I'm trying to think of, students who are watching this, like what are some things that you might tell people who are just starting out and interviewing people? So
interviewing is largely a passive process. I think people think it's very active, in that you are you will determine the thing by the questions that you ask.
Mhm.
And that your job is to be an expert on the subject. And so both of those things are not true. It's actually better if you're not an expert and that you're at the level of knowledge that your audience is at, or at least that's how you come across to the other person in terms of the questions you ask. And the other part of it is most of what I say, like occasionally I will, if you're looking at the transcript, most of what I was saying is, and then what happened? Or can we go back and, really zoom into that moment and tell me every detail? But I'm rarely sort of like asking really good intellectual questions that are, incisive. It's mostly just chronologically going through the whole story. And then when something interesting comes along saying, whoa, 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 whoa. What do you mean, you didn't want to go to architecture school anymore? We just spent 18 years of you dreaming to be an architect, and now you're not going to go? Tell me about that story. Well, it was a big deal, right? Because people sort of skim over things, right? And so it's my job to sort of get them into that headspace again. Oh yeah, and then I got divorced, and oh yeah, and then my mother passed away, and you go, whoa, your mother, what? Like, let's talk about that. What happened? I didn't know she was sick. So really paying a close attention to the story and not letting anything gloss by. Yeah, that's your kind of biggest job. You don't have to be an expert. It's better if you're a bozo, because if you're a bozo, they'll explain everything to you. They'll say, well, you don't know about how people do this in Michigan. Yeah. So people hold up their hand in Michigan. It's a sort of finding. And then you have this really wonderful little moment for the documentary where you're explaining something, because people like learning things in documentaries. So it's much better to play bozo than expert. But a lot of directors are intimidated, especially if they're interviewing an expert. And they say, in the, Title VI of the Civil Rights, and you go, yeah, of course, yeah. Sure. Rather than being like, what's that? No idea. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well. So those are two common misconceptions. But silence, right? If somebody's getting emotional, just stick with them and don't say a word. I do a lot of just sort of sitting and waiting for the next thought to bubble up, it's a passive role, and most, if you get going, it's pretty passive.
I was practicing my silence.
I was thinking that. I was thinking, oh,
I'm gonna pull.
She's picking up on it already.
Well, I am going to pull a whoa, 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 because I want to take us back to you as a magician, which I think is.
Sure.
I think I need to hear more. I think we all need to hear more. And I want to hear the ways in which you starting out as a magician has connected to you as a filmmaker.
So I think I was pretty scared of magic the first time I saw it. When I was a little kid, I was scared. I'm still kind of scared, but I was a scared kid. I was scared of my parents dying. I was scared of Halloween. I was scared of going to school, cried going to school. I was very scared. And I was scared of magic. I remember the TV show, The Masked Magician. He had this terrifying black and white mask, and he'd be in these sort of dark warehouse environments, and he'd be revealing the magic tricks. And it terrified me. I had nightmares of that masked magician coming into my bedroom at night, and I don't know what he, gonna attack me or something. And I think I got interested in magic because I felt as though if I knew how everything worked, that would somehow neutralize it. And I think that was my first inkling into magic, was to try to neutralize the fear by understanding, kind of like Scooby-Doo, the end of Scooby-Doo, that there would be relief when you kind of pull the sheet away and it's just some crazy person and it's not a ghost at all. that's what first got me interested.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found that there was a real fun in giving people the joy of experiencing a magic trick.
Mm-hmm.
And I really loved doing that. And I loved putting on a show. My sister was in ballet, and I loved going to see the Nutcracker and they had a 30-foot puppet, and I loved that, and all of the pit orchestra and the Tchaikovsky and the costumes and the special effects and the big choreographed numbers and all that. I just thought, man, I want to be a part of that. That is obviously the best job in the world. And, that sort of led me into being a magician and being in show business. And it's really wonderful. It's a wonderful skill to have. And it helped me because I had really horrible stage fright, really bad combination of being a ham and having horrible stage fright. So I would get the part in the school play, but then I would pull out, the week before because I was too scared to go on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that happened. That was a real thing. I can't remember who I was. I think it was Midsummer Night's Dream or something. I pulled out of the play because I couldn't do it. And I sent my mom to tell the teacher. Yeah, it was bad.
How did you get the part though? You had to be in front of people, right?
Yeah, well, I was good. No, it was a small, it's an audition.
Okay.
So just the teacher.
Size. Okay.
Yeah, it was the number of people.
Got it. Okay.
I could do 2 or 3 people. With 500 people, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
So, and filmmaking is great because it just goes out there and it does its thing. I don't even have to show up, or very rarely.
But then you get a million views.
I know, but the performance is locked, right? The movie is the movie. I'm not going to forget my line or fall off the stage or whatever.
Yeah.
Hit the wrong note,
Yeah.
The magic thing was good because I think it helped me get out of that sort of fragile fear state that I was in as a kid and mature, I think, as a teenager. And so magic was a great way to do that. And a great way to sort of open up my brain creatively, right? Like magic is pretty much the most creative thing you can think of, right? Not even the laws of physics apply. So you as a magician, you have to conceive of a magic trick first. You conceive of the effect in the first place. And, okay, so this pen is in my hands and then suddenly it disappears, right? And comes back. So you have that thought and then you think, how am I going to do this, right? What's the method to get to that point? And that's a great engineering schematic for almost any field and any project, and certainly in filmmaking, which is, how do we make Lucy Harris a household name? Right? Well, we make this amazing film and we get all kinds of famous people interested in it and they take it up as their cause. And, we have a wonderful partnership with them and the New York Times, and it wins the Oscar. That would be one way to do that. And so you kind of pick your goal and then work towards it. Not that we knew any of the details of what would happen in between, but that was our mission, right? Make Lucy Harris a household name. How do we get there? And the same thing is true with magic. So I think my brain kind of formulated in that way where nothing was impossible. In fact, the more impossible of an effect, the more attractive it was. And that's kind of has shaped my creativity in that, I'm not looking for practical ideas. I'm looking for amazing ideas that astonish me and then trying to figure out how in the world are we going to get there?
Yeah. I mean, how do you think people who aren't doing magic can break away from that limited thinking? Because I mean, that is everything that you're saying, like I see it when we work together and you're talking about a scene, like you're so attuned to emotions and how to evoke emotions. And I've heard you also not think limitedly, not have guardrails on like where you're going and how you think. And I don't think that's easy to do. And I wonder, like, what can we tell students? Like, how can we encourage students not to take off the guardrails?
Yeah, I mean, some guardrails are important, right? So I wouldn't advocate for just removing all guardrails no matter
I would
what.
say all, but yeah.
I think the first thing to accept is that with time and effort and persistence, almost anything is possible. The other thing to accept is the people that make a difference and shape the world around you are no smarter and have no extra special magical power that you don't have. They usually, the difference is they just believe they can. And there's a lot that feeds into that, right? A lot of it has to do with what society has told you about what your limitations are, right? As a affluent white man from Canada, society has told me my whole life, you can do anything. You have no limits on what you can do. So I'm in an extra privileged situation. And so it's relatively low-hanging fruit for me to get there mentally. But trying to figure out how to get in that headspace of there's nothing between me and Steve Jobs. Somebody like that, somebody who's had a crazy outsized effect on society. I think it's like Henry Ford or something, like whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. And so really sort of ingesting that idea, and then also surrounding yourself with people who co-sign that, right? Your parents may not be those people. Your best friend may not be those people. Your partner may not be those people. But in order for you to believe in yourself, if you're a sensitive person, you need to have other people affirming that and say, yeah, I do believe that you can do that thing. Yeah, I agree, you can do it. And if you have people around you who believe in you, you have a much, much higher success rate than if you are surrounded by people who say, I don't know, I don't think you're cut out to be a doctor. You're probably not going to be a doctor, unless you have a very unusual, rebellious personality. So those are the two pieces of advice I would give is understand that there's no difference between you and the people you admire who shape the world. There's nothing special they have that you don't have innately. They may have different privilege, they may have different relationships, resources, etc. But like in terms of the actual idea, no difference. And then second, when it comes to the film industry, recognizing that it's an incredibly oversubscribed industry, right? There's way more people who would like to count themselves as part of the film industry than often there is money or jobs in the film industry. And I say that as a thing of powerful encouragement, because when you receive rejection, which you're bound to in this industry, you can write it off. It's not you, it's the fact that there's too many people, right? So it's like, that's a great way to be Teflon in the film industry, is when people are mean or reject you or say you have no talent, it's not because those things are true. It's because it's competitive. It's because there are more people than jobs. Otherwise, you'd probably get a much better response. So really creating a big separation between the truth about your talent and the way the outside world treats you will keep and protect the precious flower of your creativity.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I mean, I try and tell filmmakers that even from a festival programming perspective, when films don't get selected, it's often not because the film isn't good. Sometimes there's just curatorial decisions and competition.
Yeah, themes.
So themes, like all of those things come into play, but I know it's hard to take, to accept that advice, but I think it's really good to hear from you as well. You were talking about collaborators. I wonder if you could talk about like how you choose the people that work with you, that you want to work with.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes I'm reacting to a piece of work. I work with a lot of people over and over again, but usually how I met those people is I saw something or heard something that they did, and my reaction was, who did that? Who made that creative choice? I want to know who that person is. because there's something about it that feels personal or intimate or particularly sensitive or sometimes ambitious, right? Creatively ambitious. And that's usually what draws me is the work. You know, that has drawn me to a lot of amazing people, yourself included. But that's all it comes down to, because that's all the audience is going to see. They're not going to see that this person's really nice, or that they're cheap, or that, you know, they went to the University of Southern California. None of it matters. None of it matters. All that matters is, you know, it's a role-based business. And so what matters is your capacity to contribute in that role. And it all comes down to the work. It's kind of like Moneyball. You've seen the movie Moneyball?
You know, I haven't seen it. I mean, so I know about it, but I haven't seen it. Yeah,
like the big sort of concept of Moneyball is that this coach who didn't have any money for his team, the Oakland A's, you know, the sort of traditional way of making a baseball team was, you know, who had the right looks and how much did the other team pay for them, and basically they threw that all out and they said, we're just going to look at how many times they get on base. Purely, which is how you win baseball games. Purely, what's the result? And so that's why I always just go from the end product of what they do. And then, you know, from there, obviously trying to curate a team of people and cultivate an environment at the company where people have a psychologically safe space to iterate and plus the movie up.
Do you find that like approaching it that way, you end up with people that, you know, have a similar approach and aesthetic or processes, or do you end up with a lot of people that are very different from you? Like, do you value one over the other?
Well, I think it honestly has changed over time. I think the first part of my career was all about finding people who gave me exactly what I wanted, right? Who were like virtually identical to my style. And I think as I've spent, you know, 8 years or something on that bent, I started to look, you know, a couple of years ago into like, what else can cinema do, right? What else can short documentary do? And how could, I mean, honestly, your style was very different. I mean, that's a good example, right? The film I saw, the young ballet dancer, right? Like, that was a very different film. Like, I'm a very music heavy film. That was a verite, like capital V verite film. And I think as time goes on, I am more eager to experiment and try different things because I feel less obsessed with proving to myself that I can do the type of film I have in my mind, and more interested in self-discovery and collaborative discovery. And that's really what I get a kick out of now, is going in the room with somebody who may not agree with me at all about how a film should be put together and seeing what we can come up with. And you kind of have to accept sometimes that results in disaster. And sometimes it results in something really special and especially true, which I think is the case with Queen of Basketball, right? Like the things that I was focused on and the things that you were focused on really was a good match in being able to highlight Lucy's very special and sparkling personality, and unexpected but true elements of her opinion or life story, with this really kind of like salty, crunchy filmmaking style that is very sort of musically driven. So that's what I'm interested in now, which helps me get out of a sea of sameness.
When did that shift happen? Did it happen before Queen of Basketball? It's sort of like, oh, it's kind of nice to.
You know, I made this film called That's My Jazz about a friend of mine, Milton, who is a pastry chef, and his father was a jazz musician, and I got a really good look into those two worlds of jazz and pastry and like the high-end Michelin star cooking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, music and cooking are great analogs for filmmaking. And both of those showed me a little bit more of a world of experimentation, right? Like, you know, often happens with chefs, right? They come out and they're like extraordinary French chefs. And then over time they get bored of making the same kind of things and they start experimenting and collaborating and trying out different flavors and new vegetables and, you know, how do we work this in and that in? And I think I saw that with Milton. And I thought, how can I do that but filmmaking? And then with jazz, you know, the thing that I sort of saw from his father was, and what he told me about it, which I was really not familiar with jazz at all, was about being open and improvise, right? Say yes to a beautiful, unexpected opportunity. And that was liberating, I think, to try to sort of incorporate those things and get out of how I've done things before. And I feel like I'm in another sort of skin shedding, right? Like I've made now these 8 sort of almost famous films. They have a similar aesthetic and sort of thinking about how both we can sort of continue creating something that people really like, but also, you know, live on the edge a little more, which is fun.
Yeah. So what part of the filmmaking process do you feel, I don't know, most invigorated or excited or calm?
I feel very invigorated when people tell me that my good idea is impossible.
Okay.
Right? If I really feel strongly that this would make a great movie and somebody says, I don't think anybody's going to like it, that's me at my most invigorated.
What was the last time someone did that?
Oh, it happens all the time. I don't think that story is compelling enough to really make a film, or I'm not sure if this filmmaker, you know, is up to the task. When I really believe in something and somebody says, no, you can't, I get very passionate and invigorated and on the negative side, bullheaded about it. Calmness comes when I have delivered what I promised to the storyteller. I also had a calm when it won the Oscar, you know, because you have these moments of feeling like the sun is shining through the clouds for a second on what you've been working on, and that it can never go back, right? Lucy's story won an Oscar, and now that's attached to her story forever, can't go back. And there is relief with that when you have a story that has been not told or underappreciated or whatever. There's an enormous amount of calm and catharsis in moments like that I certainly feel.
Yeah. What was it like sitting there when Queen of Basketball was announced as the winner? I know, you know, Lucy's family was at the Oscars. And we've never got to talk about what it was like to just be sitting there with your mother. I know, but I wasn't next to you. To hear it, I had my own experience.
I was very nervous. I had serious butterflies. I also, my pants were too tight and I was worried that when I stood up, I were going to rip. So I was very concerned about
stressful.
that. That was about 60% of what I was thinking about. Then, 40% was thinking about, am I going to flub if I get up there, right? Am I going to forget what to say if I get up there? And then about 30 seconds before, as the clips of all the other films started playing, and you're seated with all your fellow nominees, I became very calm. I don't know why. I'm not a religious person, but it was in a movie, you could sort of imagine the spirit of Lucy being like, I got this. It sort of felt like that. I felt very calm and I was not worried about what was going to happen. Not that I knew one way or another. I just felt like whatever happens, it's all good. I felt a sense of it's all good. And then when they said the Queen of Basketball, I think I closed my eyes. I don't really remember a lot between that and after the speech going backstage. I don't. I just went into mode and did what I needed to do. But I felt an unusual amount of calm that night. An unusual amount of calm.
Yeah. And what is, I wonder if you could share what the experience has been like being in relationship with Lucy's family.
Yeah, I think they were extremely, I mean, not everybody, but I think there was some hesitancy about who the heck is this guy? Let's see, right? Let's see. And then I think slowly over time, they saw that I was sincere in what I want to do, but it took time. But I also think that process bonded us even closer in the end because they saw that I stuck with it. I really grew to, love all of those people, and hopefully vice versa. We bonded in real ways, especially around that weekend of the Oscars.
And what's next? What's going on? What's next for short documentary? What's next for you? Experimental, pushing boundary films?
Yeah, I mean, I might have over-indexed on saying how experimental I am, and then just release more films that are in the same vein. I think, I love short documentaries. The first thing that happens when you win an award like this is people suddenly become aware of you, and you get a lot of interest in wanting to collaborate on big projects, little projects, all kinds of different projects, and you can't do them all. And so the key is to have some clarity about what you want to do, and try to lead out of love for stories or the kind of work that you do versus out of fear of missing out on an opportunity, which is very easy to fall into. So I've been really focused on that. What are the stories that I care about? What are the stories that invigorate me? Really focusing on short documentaries, because that's a form that I care about. I think it's ascendant. I think it's the most exciting corner of cinema because it's growing rather than diminishing, like a lot of the rest of the industry is. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. I hope things don't change too much because of an award. And so I'm focused on just sticking with what we were doing before, which is telling great stories independently in the short documentary format.
Lastly, do you have any advice for the students who are trying to break into the industry beyond all the great things that you've already imparted?
Find out what you don't like about the film industry and put it on your goals to change those things rather than to live with them. I think it's relatively common, the thought that that's the way it is, right? That's the way it works. And if you want to get along around here, you better accept it sooner or later. And I think step one, if we're going to have a successful future as a storytelling and entertainment industry, is not accepting any of those things. And in as much as putting on your list that you want to direct a feature film or you want to tell a certain story that you'd really like to tell, I think it's also about identifying things that you don't like about our community or our industry or that are unfair, and put that on your list too of things you want to correct and adjust. We need that. We need that energy. We need people to take ownership in the film industry and say, I'm not okay with this. We're going to change it. And I would just encourage all the students who are watching this to know that change is 100% possible, doable, has been proven time and time again in history, and not to forget the ways that you want to change the film industry in addition to your creative ambitions as an artist.
Thank you. Well said.
You're a good interviewer, Stephanie.
Hey, I was taking notes. I've listened to many hours of yours, taking notes.
Yeah, true. We spent a lot of time.
We didn't have the right frame. We should have been like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have been here. This is more of like, right?
Yeah.
Sort of
right, like this. Yeah.